Now that we're nearing the final arcs of One Piece and Laugh Tale seems almost within reach, debate within the community about who the next Straw Hat or even the final Straw Hat will be has never been higher. Not all of those discussions are perfectly rational. No, a commercial for an almond snack is not evidence that Yamato is joining. No man, Crocodile is not joining. It doesn't matter how many Reddit posts you make about it. So here, I don't intend to waste, around 50 minutes of your time just to tell you that this is what I think might happen, maybe, possibly. No, this video is this long because I intend to prove it to you that this is the final crew, that this here, Carrot, Yamato and Vivi are the final crew members, and that these are the devil fruits that they will be eating. To be able to do this, I'm gonna be going through a lot of stuff, from narrative to wordplay to foreshadowing, inspirations from mythology that Oda used when creating the Straw Hats, etc. But here, don't worry, I separated the video in chapters, so feel free to use them. Without further ado, let's get this thing started. I'm Gabiru, and this here is the Sanigo Jusanko, or the Sunny 13 theory. The core of this theory is something that I came up with originally about 9 months ago by building upon the Devil Fruit number theory. For those unaware, the Devil Fruits of the current Straw Hats follow a specific naming pattern using Goro Awase, which is Japanese wordplay, a common feature of Japanese literature in which numbers are associated with certain syllables based on the Japanese readings and even the English readings for each number. All Devil Fruits have 2-syllable names, so they each have a corresponding number pair. Gomu is 5-6, Hito is 110, Hana is 8-7, and Yomi is 4-3. The Devil Fruits of the current Straw Hats have all the numbers from 1 to 10, each appearing only once, except for 2 and 9. Following this theme, only the pair 2-9 or 9-2 is lacking. More than that, if you add together all of these number pairs, including the lacking 2-9, you get 325, which can be read as Sanigo, the Japanese name for the sunny. This has led people to speculate that the next and final Devil Fruit to be added to the Straw Hats has to correspond to 2-9, such as Kuma's Nikyu Nikyu no Mi. In fact, one fan was even brave enough to ask Oda this in an SPS, to which he responded by acting surprised and suspiciously dodging the question, so we know there's something to this. Now, I know what you're thinking, didn't Luffy's fruit just get confirmed to have a completely different name? Well, it's more complicated than that. As a Hito Hito no Mi, the numbering for the fruit would be 110, just like Chopper's, or maybe 25 for Nika. Yet Luffy has never been associated with any of these numbers, but with 5-6, it's literally everywhere. From being his specific number to shirts he wears to Enel's fruit, the opposite of the Gomu Gomu no Mi being given a name with the same numbering, to color spreads to his gladiator number in the Colosseum, down to stupid things like the Sunny's height being 56 meters and Dragon's height being 256 centimeters just because he's Luffy's dad. Even with the Nika reveal, this continues to be the case, with 5-6 being Luffy's t-shirts for Movie Red and in the color spread for chapter 1045. There's something more complex going on with this fruit than it simply being a Zoan with a different name. As hinted by Kaido pointing out that Luffy turning the environment to rubber is what you'd expect from a Paramecia Devil Fruit awakening, better than a Zoan. Now I have my own theory of what's going on, but that's for another video. For now, suffice to say that Luffy's fruit will always be the Gomu Gomu no Mi and will always have the numbering 5-6. Mostly because even if Luffy found out about this alternative name, he would still be calling all of his moves by Gomu Gomu no. Does anyone doubt that? People who abide by the Devil Fruit number theory generally believe Kuma's fruit will be the final fruit of the crew because then the number pairs are done and the 325 for Sanigo will be complete. For this reason, most believe that Yamato is not joining as Inu Inu doesn't fit the team and Franky probably inherits Kuma's fruit. But what if the next Devil Fruits to be added also follow a pattern, just a different one, and their sum spells a new word? Let's entertain this idea. If the Devil Fruits of the Straw Hats form 2 different words, then what determines if a fruit or member falls in the first group or the second group? The obvious answer is the time skip. Members that joined before the time skip add to the first sum and form Sanigo. Members added after the time skip form the next word. So the 2-9 fruit has to go to a member that joined pre-time skip. And here's my candidate for the one to inherit that fruit. Vivi's return has been destined since the end of the Alabasta arc. When the Straw Hats leave Alabasta, Vivi asks them, "If we see each other again, will you still call me your nakama? To which they agree. Nakama are crew members, not just friends, Tomodachi. For their promise to be true, Vivi has to come back as a Straw Hat. Vivi was originally given the Straw Hat number of 5.5 by Oda in an SPS, indicating her honorary status. But in the recent Vivi cards, she was given the number 13. Now, this could be interpreted as her being the last because of her honorary status, and Mary and Sunny being 11 and 12. But then, why change her number from 5.5 to 13? And if we get 13 members and Vivi is not one of them, Vivi's number has to be changed again. Seems like some weird lack of foresight by Oda. No, Vivi gets number 13 because she rejoins as a 13th member, and this has been hinted at since her introduction. 13 in Japanese is Jusan, literally 10-3. This means the reading for chapter 103 is Jusan, that is 13. Chapter 103 is the chapter Vivi first appears. Vivi first joins the crew in Whiskey Peak when the crew promises to bring her to Alabasta. This happens in chapter 113 in volume 13. 113 can be read as Hito Jusan, with Hito meaning person or people. 113 is person 13. Vivi's father, Cobra, was the 12th ruler of Alabasta, so Vivi was raised to become the 13th. Vivi is the last and 13th member of the Straw Hats. But why even have Vivi join, then leave, only to rejoin so much time later? Well, Vivi is a natural-born leader that was trained since she was a child to rule the massive kingdom of Alabasta. She's a first-caliber politician and strategist. But the small Alabasta crew had no need for these skills. Now the Straw Hats are an emperor crew, a political force with allies, thousands under their command, and soon also territory. They are also fated to wage a war against the world government. They need Vivi to make proper use of their assets. So Vivi returns as the politician or chief of staff of the crew, charged with commanding the Grand Fleet and with diplomacy. The events of the Reverie are setting up Vivi's return. She conveniently meets members of the fleet that have Luffy's Vivre card. Sabo was also at the Reverie and also has Luffy's Vivre card, and could be the one to bring her to them. The Reverie also gives Vivi a pretty damn good reason to come back. Vivi was marked to die by Imu, meaning she is no longer safe in Alabasta and thus has to return to the Straw Hats. But why is Vivi even targeted? Shirahoshi's inclusion among the pictures Imu looks at hints that the reason for targeting Vivi is also an ancient weapon, Pluton, said to be buried somewhere in Alabasta. In fact, Alabasta can be seen as short for Islandobasta, Island Buster, like Pluton is said to be able to destroy whole islands. Targeting the Nefertaris means the world government has made a move on Alabasta to retrieve Pluton. Pluton is also most likely what Blackbeard refers to when he says he would take it for himself, meaning he likely clashed with the Marines in Alabasta. Blackbeard is fated to win this conflict and take Pluton for himself, as Pluton is the Greco-Roman god of the underworld, so a fitting ship for Blackbeard. And Frankie had access to the blueprints that could build a ship to counter Pluton. The Sunny versus Pluton is an inevitable battle that will happen when Luffy fights Blackbeard. Last time we saw Vivi, she and Kuma were both at Marijoa. Events involving both of them which weren't yet revealed took place. Likely Cobra died and is the one we see the Alabastans grieving over, and Kuma, who was already in a tragic state, was the object of the fight between revolutionaries and world government. It is likely that Kuma died, or even that the revolutionaries retrieved him and chose to put him out of his misery as he was no longer human. His power could then reincarnate to a nearby fruit and be eaten by Vivi. And Vivi already has foreshadowing for inheriting this fruit. Vivi is first able to join the Straw Hats because of Mr. 9, and then is able to say her goodbye to them and confirm her permanent spot in the crew because of Mr. 2. Vivi's and Kuma's stories also mirror each other. They were first royalty, then members of a revolutionary organization seeking to topple government, and finally they become pirates. But what is the thematic backing to Vivi getting the Niku Niku no Mi? Firstly, it's fitting for the fighting style of the princess in the crew to be bait-slapping people to the other side of the earth, and she was also slapped by Wappo as a kid, so I kinda want to see her Kuma slap him to the Shadow Realm. She could also use this ability to send messages to the Grand Fleet or allies that cannot be wiretapped like transponders nails. And have you wondered why Kuma always carries a Bible and is themed around a bear? In the Bible, there are many verses containing bears, but a common theme is the fierceness of a mother bear deprived of her cubs. In particular this one, you know that your father and his men are mighty men, and that they are enraged, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. Besides, your father is expert in war. This verse refers to King David of Israel and Judea, and is said to David's son Absalom, said to be the most handsome man in the kingdom after he rebelled against his father. The Niconomy is first showcased in Thriller Bark when we had Absalom, the undefeated worst character in One Piece, and who had someone obsessed with marrying him, possibly a gag take on the handsomeness of the Absalom in the Bible. Thus, he might be a clue that this verse holds some meaning for Kuma or his fruit. See, Vivi is foremost a pacifist. In fact, it took a very civil debate with Luffy to convince her to risk the lives of Vivi and the crew, so how could she command a whole fleet into war? After Alabasta's devastation, the otherwise peaceful princess returns with the fierceness required for the coming wars. She is like David in that verse, a military expert with the fierceness of a mother bear deprived of her cubs. This is also in line with how the Niconomy is described, peaceful sounding but actually devastating. David was a major inspiration for Vivi's character, and potentially even for her position in the crew and Devil Fruit. David is described in Hebrew sources as the ideal king, and is chosen by God to be king of Israel as a child. This is similar to how Vivi was raised to rule Alabasta from her infancy and displays uncanny skills in statecraft even as a child, almost as if chosen by the gods. David's father, Jesse, was also called Nahash, meaning serpent. Kinda like Vivi's father is named Cobra, no? David's sling that he used to defeat Goliath was possibly even an inspiration for Vivi's peacock slashers. David was also known for his masterful playing of the harp, and in that very chapter when the Niconomy is first introduced, what do we have on the cover? Vivi playing the harp. Finally, the day associated with David is his feast day, December 29th, the 12th and last month of the year, just like Vivi is the 12th and last recruit, and the 2-9 number of her Devil Fruit. And now we can finally get back to the number theory. As Vivi joined pre-timeskip, she is part of the first sum. As she is rejoining post-timeskip, she is also part of the second sum, being the only character able to be in both. And this is massive. Based purely on storytelling, Yamato could go in many different directions as a character, as she's still under the Oden persona and should undergo a drastic change in learning to be herself. This could mean she doesn't follow in Oden's footsteps in the end and does not join the Straw Hats. Or it could just as easily mean she still chooses to follow Oden's path and carry on his will without actually trying to be Oden. Just like Luffy follows in Roger's footsteps, yet is still his own individual. The case for Yamato not becoming a Straw Hat would be stronger if Luffy had accepted Yamato into the crew, but he didn't. What I believe this sets up is that Luffy wouldn't accept Oden 2.0 into the crew, but he would accept Yamato. A major point of Oden's character is that he had two conflicting wills. He wanted to be free to adventure and sail the seas, and he also wanted to protect Wano. Those two are incompatible. It's because of this that Wano ends up falling to Orochi and Kaido. The solution for this conflict comes with Momonosuke and Yamato. Momonosuke can inherit Oden's will to protect and rule Wano, and thus remain in Wano as Shogun, which is what his entire character arc has been setting up for. Yamato can then take on the will to continue Oden's journey. Because Oden's conflicting wills are inherited separately by two different people, there is no longer any conflict. And now Yamato, we finally have all of the pieces we need to unveil all this insane wordplay with the Devil Fruits of the Straw Hats. Yamato has the Inu no Mi. I corresponds to 1 and Nu is frequently associated with 2, but can also be 0 from Nuru, no. But why use 0 instead of 2? Because 1, 2 is a pair of numbers between 1 and 10, putting it alongside the other fruits. Yet 1 and 2 are already taken. Using 1, 0 instead of 1, 2 sets her number pair apart from the previous fruits with numbers only from 1 to 10, meaning it doesn't interfere with the previous pattern. Adding Yamato's fruit to the second sum, we get 39, which can be read as Sanko. Ko is used as a counter at the end of numbers, so Sanko would be 3 units, 3 objects, or 3 pieces. Now, maybe there could be some meaning to this, but I don't believe this is where it ends. If one of the members that joins post time skip gets a devil fruit with Goroase numbering 100, then we get 139, which can be read as Jusanko, meaning 13 individuals. Combining both words, we get Sanigo Jusanko, the 13 of the sunny or the sunny 13. But it doesn't end there. If you sum the digits of the pre-time skip number, you get 10, which is the number of Straw Hats pre-time skip, Vivi included. If you sum the digits of the post-time skip number, you get 13, the final number of Straw Hats. And, as if that wasn't enough, if you sum both numbers, so summing the sunny with the 13 Straw Hats, you get 464. Summing the digits of that number, you get 14. Why? Because the 13 Straw Hats plus the sunny makes 14. The sunny has or will have a Klabauterman, just like the Mary. So, with Yamato and Vivi joining, we have one spot left, and we know that one of the post-time skip recruits will eat a devil fruit with Goroase numbering 100. Now, just saying, it likely isn't the Fishman. So, who is it? In a lot of ways, Carrot seems like the most obvious choice for the future crew member. Her role in the ship is no speculation, she has already acted as a lookout for the Straw Hats, and that is a standard role in a pirate ship, so one you'd expect to be filled. She's written to be the perfect person for the role with her great eyesight, a reference to the myth of Carrot's improving eyesight and to rabbits being far-sighted. She can go to the crow's nest in a single jump, so she can easily switch back and forth from the crow's nest to the deck to participate in crew interactions. Her jumping ability would also allow her to see way past the horizon. She gets excited about the exact same stuff as Luffy, so she's the one Luffy would want as a lookout to call him over when she spots something interesting. And being the lookout and thus looking towards the horizon fits with her setup surrounding the dawn of the world. Pedro's death blatantly pushes Carrot towards joining the crew, and this flashback of wanting to join Roger's crew but being unable to do so because of Roger running out of time, with Carrot now being at the right time and the right place to join Luffy's crew in his stead, is such an obvious hint of her joining. By the end of Whole Cake Island, it seemed obvious she was going to join, and that we will get more build up to her joining in Wano, and yet... So I'm gonna quickly try to argue here why there is for certain a lot more to Carrot in the story despite her absence in Wano so far. Firstly, she received from Pedro words passed down to him by Goldie Roger himself, those words being, "Be patient, everyone gets their time to shine." It's interesting Oda chose those words specifically for Carrot, a character that then he went on to sideline for so long, a lot of the fandom now believes she's done in the story. And remember those words, "Be patient, everyone gets their time to shine." She was also given by her dying mentor an inherited will surrounding the dawn of the world, which is arguably the most prominent theme in the entire series, with Luffy's hat symbolizing the sun rising above the horizon, Luffy rising from the east in Dawn Island and then circumventing the globe, erasing darkness like the sun, Luffy being the sun god, their ship being the Thousand Sunny, etc. Look, you don't give this kind of setup to a character without having something big in store for them, especially considering how rarely even side characters die in the present in One Piece. But doesn't the fact that she lost to Perospero, who then was defeated by Nekomamushi, mean that Oda has thrown her out of her own story? No, quite the opposite actually. Accomplishing her revenge would have been the worst thing possible for her character, because it would mean the culmination of Pedro's story is just having retribution on this random Big Mom officer, rather than the stuff with the dawn of the world that was Pedro's life mission that he told her about just before he died, and that is astronomically more important. Pedro was shown over and over again how comfortable he was with his own mortality, due to his spent lifespan being 82 years, and going as far as pulling the trigger himself, meaning he wouldn't want to be avenged. What he actually would have wanted from Carrot is what motivated his every action, and what he talked to her about right before dying, the dawn of the world. Losing to Perospero builds upon Carrot's tragic arc over the loss of Pedro so she can then realize her true purpose and ambition. And if you don't believe me, look at the panel in which she runs towards Peros, how Oda drew her and Luffy almost exactly the same. But behind her, Wanda is worriedly asking where she is going, but for Luffy, the guy behind him tells him to keep moving forward. Pedro's last words were, "You guys must keep moving forward." The rest of that page is Marco talking to Big Mom. Marco says Big Mom misunderstands what remnants means, and that Whitebeard's voice no longer binds them. that everyone in the former crew is free. Big Mom agrees and says dead men give no orders. The point of this juxtaposition is that Luffy is moving forward, towards Kaido and towards becoming Pirate King. But Carrot isn't. She's not free, she's bound by this wrongly perceived duty to avenge a dead man. The fact that Carrot lost due to the moon being blocked by the clouds show how unreliable Sulong is as a power right now, and sets up the need for her to be able to use Sulong irrespective of the moon. In summary, these are the things that we know about Carrot's future. She needs a way to inherit Pedro's will of the dawn of the world. She needs some kind of personal connection to the dawn, something that makes her a crucial piece in bringing about the dawn. She needs a way to be able to turn Sulong without the full moon, and she gets a devil fruit with Goro Awase numbering 100. Don't worry, this will all come together later on. So the main reason why so many people believe that we would only have 10 crew members plus Luffy is this one line from chapter 1. You'll find many different translations to this line, but the most accurate seems to be, I want like 10 people. It was never meant to be a hard set number, it was only meant to give us a general idea of the size of the crew. You know, a small band of friends, rather than a Yonta Maria type of situation. And in the end, it could just turn out to be wordplay again. Luffy says, I want Junin, meaning 10 people. 12 in Japanese is Juni. You see, Junin becomes Juni. I want 10 people becomes I want 12. And if you think Oda is above doing something like this, remember, the only reason why Rasta Patrick the Starfish is able to talk like a human and be a clothes designer is that Hitode, meaning starfish, sounds kinda like Hito, meaning human. No, really, that's the entire reason. Why does he have stitches though? There has been a lot of foreshadowing to this specific number. The Straw Hats are called Mugiwara no Ichimi. This is suspicious as normally pirate crews are called Kaizokudan, like Kurohige Kaizokudan or Hyakuju Kaizokudan, with Ichimi simply meaning crew. The reason is again wordplay. Ichimi is 1-3, so Mugiwara no Ichimi equals the 13 Straw Hats. The Sunny's Soldier Dock system has the numbers 1 and 3 at opposite sides. 1 is the default position, so the Sunny has been sailing around with a giant 1 and 3 painted on each side. The other reason why people believe that there will be only 10 crew members plus Luffy is Blackbeard's crew. Blackbeard's crew has mirrored Luffy's crew throughout the series, with them maintaining a comparable number of crew members at all times. Sometimes more for Luffy, sometimes more for Blackbeard. It is the standard belief in the community that their crews will mirror each other in their final clash, like Blackbeard is a dark mirror for Luffy. Blackbeard has his 10 Titanic captains, but there is no reason to believe that that is his final number of crew members. Last time we saw him, he was trying to recruit Moria, implying that he's likely to get more people. The hint of his final number of crew members is in the word Titanic. The Titans are the 12 children of Gaia and Uranus in Greek mythology. They are the gods that precede the Olympians. In the Titanomachy, the Olympians, also 12 as per Greek myth canon, defeat the Titans and take control of Mount Olympus. So Luffy and his Olympians defeat Blackbeard and his Titans for the control of Mount Olympus, which in this context would be Laughdale or the Holy Land Marijoa if Blackbeard turns out to be the final battle of the series. I believe that when creating the Straw Hats, or at least a rough idea of them, Oda combined 3 different inspirations to reach this specific number. Jesus and his 12 apostles, the gods of the Olympus who are 12 but actually 13 if you include both Hestia and Dionysius, and the Zodiac that has 12 animals but actually 13 if you count the cat, who's part of the Zodiac lore and so is commonly included in cultural depictions of the Zodiac. I won't describe here what Straw Hat corresponds to each sign in the Zodiac, as that is actually a lot more complex than it would seem initially, and it will take some setup from the video following this one to properly argue it. Just know that obviously Nami as the cat burglar would be the cat, so we should end up with 13 crew members to cover all of the signs. The story of Joy Boy and his reappearance is inspired by the story of Jesus Christ and his second coming, and the greatest hint of this is actually Kaido. It is said that before the second coming of Christ is when the Antichrist, also called Pseudo-Christus or False Christ, will appear. So you see why it is now that Joy Boy is making his second coming as Luffy, that we have Kaido, who represents a fake Joy Boy, as an enemy. someone who tried to be Joy Boy but couldn't. I believe the Olympians were not only an inspiration for the number of Straw Hats, but for the Straw Hats individually, each being inspired by one of the gods of the Olympus. First, Luffy as the captain would be Zeus, the god of the gods, ruler of the Olympus, and the one who assigns roles to the other gods. Red the Shotgun and me came up with this originally about 8 months ago, so this is way before current events in the manga. Yet still, you might be thinking, wouldn't it make more sense for Nami to correspond to Zeus since she controls lightning and the weather and literally has Zeus as a weapon rather than a guy who's made of rubber, the opposite of lightning? Well, when we get to Nami, you'll understand why. Zoro would be Ares, god of courage and war. Zoro is the one whose official role is as a combatant. He's the one with a completely combat-oriented dream and focuses on the strength and fighting prowess necessary for the crew's advancement towards their goals. Like Ares embodies the physical valor necessary in war. Like Ares, Zoro can be physical and violent and personifies bloodlust. Nami would be Hera, the queen of the gods, the goddess of women, marriage, motherhood, and family. Nami has a lot of focus on protecting children and generally acts very motherly towards them. She also has been centered in 3 different plotlines involving marriage. Her backstory is also entirely centered on family. Hera is also Zeus' wife, and if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know Hera is constantly pissed at Zeus because the man has more affairs than he has meals. Finally, Nami is also frequently mad at Luffy, not because of infidelity, but because he's an idiot. In one of the myths about Hera being mad at Zeus, she steals his thunderbolt, which would explain here the inspiration for Nami being the one with lightning powers. This is also similar to how Luffy is somewhat based on the Monkey King Son Goku from Journey to the West, yet Nami is the one with Goku's signature extendable staff and flying cloud. It's also fitting that Nami has stolen these things from Luffy as she is introduced as a thief who steals from pirates. And I believe we even got an allegory to this with Big Mom's homies. Her main homies represent the 3 brothers. Zeus is Luffy, the dumbest, most gluttonous one, and the one who ends up partnered with Nami. Prometheus is Sabo, not only because of the fire, but also because Prometheus is seen as a revolutionary figure for bringing fire to humanity. And finally, Napoleon is Ace, as his Big Mom's sword, like Ace was named after Roger's sword. Once Zeus leaves Big Mom, she creates Hera, having the same lightning powers as Zeus, except being more competent at using them, and even almost eating Zeus to steal his lightning powers. Usopp would be Apollo, the god of archery. Apollo is also the god of a bunch of random, unrelated things. This was possibly the inspiration for Usopp being a bit of a jack of all trades. Apollo is also the god of truth and prophecy, and here we get an amusing inversion from Oda, as Usopp is the god of lies and prophecy, because his lies come true. Now for Sanji, you at first think I'm joking about this, but hear me out, okay? Sanji corresponds to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, lust, beauty, pleasure, and passion. Sanji is the most passionate of the crew and the one most focused on love and sexuality. But here we see another inversion. Instead of being a beautiful woman that men lust over, the deity of love and lust is a horny man who lusts after women. Aphrodite's Roman counterpart is Venus. Yes, that's what the planet was named after. And Sanji has a very big association with the planet Venus. Venus is the hottest planet and the only one to rotate at the opposite direction of the others, having a 177 degrees actual tilt. Sanji's eyebrows curl in the opposite direction of those of his brothers. And when Sanji was found by Germa, his bounty was made 177 million berries. Sanji also has a big association with Lucifer, the devil, with his fire powers, Diabo Jamba meaning devil leg, and his potential connection with the Lunarians, who are winged people who are expelled from God's land. Like fallen angels, like Lucifer. Lucifer is called the Morning Star or the Light Bringer, and historically is a name given to deities associated with the planet Venus. Chopper would be Artemis, the goddess of the wilderness and wild animals, as Chopper is the one who is an actual animal and can talk to animals. Artemis is also the goddess of the moon. Now remember that Chopper would only descend to town with Kureha during the full moon, because she's also the goddess of the hunt. Artemis' associated animal is the deer. And here again we have an inversion as Artemis hunts the deer and Chopper is the deer. Robin would be Athena, the goddess of wisdom, knowledge, handicrafts, civilization, and rational thought. Do I need to explain this one? Robin is the scholar of the crew and the most knowledgeable individual. Oh, and fun fact, in one of the myths, Athena has a weaving duel with a mortal woman named Arachne, after which Athena turns Arachne into a spider. This is where the name Arachnid comes from. This possibly inspired Robin's recent fight with Black Maria. Frankie is Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths, metalworking, carpenters, craftsmen, artisans, sculptors, and metallurgy. Frankie is heavily inspired by Hephaestus. Just like Frankie is a cyborg and builds metal machinery and robots, Hephaestus created automatons from metal, maybe the earliest cultural depictions of something akin to robots. The myth of Hephaestus' fall from Olympus clearly inspired Frankie's origins. His throw from Olympus into the sea by his mother. In one of the accounts, he is then raised by sea nymphs, Thetis and the Oceanid Eurynomé. In another account, he falls on an island where he is then raised to be a master craftsman. You see the similarities here with Frankie being thrown to the sea by his pirate parents, then raised by a fisherman and a mermaid to be a master craftsman? Then we have Brooke would be Dionysius, the god of winemaking, insanity, ritual madness, and festivity. Brooke is the god of the party, drives crowds to insanity, and can even use his powers to put people in frenzies. Dionysius is also called Twiceborn, being considered a dying and rising soul due to his descent and return from the underworld. His cult was also a cult of souls, communicating between the living and the dead, just like Brooke went to the underworld, raised from the dead, and then became the Soul King. Jinbei would obviously correspond to Poseidon, god of the sea, the waters, and of storms. Interestingly, Poseidon was also the god of earthquakes, and Jinbei was introduced being imprisoned for refusing to go against Whitebeard, the creator of earthquakes. Jinbei had a great respect for Whitebeard due to him protecting Fishman Island and would stand against anyone willing to harm him. Carrot corresponds to Hermes. Hermes was the messenger of the gods, and also the god of travel and of crossing barriers. Carrot literally worked as a messenger bird between Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, ruler of day and ruler of night, so crossing over the barrier between day and night. Carrot flies with her feet, similar to how Hermes flies with his sandals. She's also one of, or maybe the speediest crew member. Hermes was also described as a trickster, like Carrot, and a prodigy. And fittingly, Carrot would be the youngest member of the crew at mere 15 years old, 2 years younger than Chopper. Reaching the end, we have Yamato, who is inspired by Demeter, goddess of the harvest, agriculture, and fertility of the land, and also was the god of the sacred law and seen as a legislator. The Okuchi no Makami is the deity of the harvest in Japan who guards the fields. We also see that the main way the people have been oppressed in Wano is through hunger and from the land being turned infertile. For Yamato to protect Wano in Oda's stead, it means to bring back the harvest and the fertility of the land. Yamato is notably also following her sacred law, Oden's logbook that she sees as her Bible. Likewise, she is likely to keep a log once she joins the Straw Hats, and that logbook would then be seen as a sacred test by future generations. Thus, by writing the log, Yamato is also the legislator, creator of sacred law. Finally, Vivi is Hestia, goddess of the home and the state. Vivi shares Hestia's diplomatic, non-confrontational nature, the protectiveness of her home, Alabasta, and her presiding over the state, as she was raised since childhood to rule a nation. The reason given to why Hestia is sometimes replaced by Dionysius is that Hestia gave her seat in the Olympus due to her non-confrontational and domestic nature. This is similar to how Vivi gave up her spot on the crew to remain in her home country. Now that she can't return to her home country, she must return to the Straw Hats, retake her seat in the Olympus, thus explaining why we end up with 13 Olympians. Okay, this one is gonna sound a little crazy. The idea that Oda had this crew planned out since the very beginning of the series, even as extremely rough character concepts, seems ludicrous, right? But looking through chapters 1 to 13, I found enough evidence for this idea to have quite some merit. So here, I'll present possible hints from each chapter for the Straw Hat with the same number as the chapter number. First chapter, all about Luffy and his backstory, not much to be said here. Chapter 2, first chapter Zoro is mentioned, Luffy says he's going to recruit Zoro. Chapter 3, the first chapter and Navigator is mentioned, with Kobe having acted as one as Luffy was just drifting around thus far. Kobe says Luffy needs to recruit a Navigator. Luffy says he'll do that. Chapter 4, Captain Axe Morgan is introduced in a similar boisterous manner as Captain Usopp is introduced. In this chapter, Kobe is shot by a sniper from atop the marine tower. This is the first time we see someone being shot from a distance. Chapter 5 is named The King of the Pirates and the Master Swordsman, and the cover with the two dolphins jumping side by side reflects this, right? Except Luffy's dolphin is in the front having a drink with him. The two dolphins jumping are the rivals, the two wings of the Pirate King, Zoro and Sanji. In this chapter, Zoro is freed from his punishment of starving for a month. Sanji's backstory is about starvation, and one of his main traits is not letting anyone starve, no matter who they are. This is the reason Luffy picked Sanji as a crewmate in the first place. Chapter 6 is named Hitorime, meaning the first. This is about Zoro joining as the first crewmate, and starts a trend of chapters being named like this according to each member's joining order, with those kanji meaning person. Hito means one, but can also mean human, like Chopper's Hito no Mi, the human fruit. So the chapter name is a double meaning on the first person or member Luffy recruits, or the Hito person, the user of the Hito no Mi, Chopper, the sixth Straw Hat. We also have Luffy telling a villain not to make light of Kobe's conviction. This is similar to how in Drum Island we see Luffy telling a villain not to make light of Chopper's conviction. Chapter 7 is named Friends. Robin's character arc with joining the Straw Hats is finally making friends she can trust. But in this chapter, we see for the first time Luffy say the words that mark their departure with Vivi. We're going separate ways, but we'll always be friends. So the hints about Vivi, now Robin? The thing is, that moment is the confirmation of Vivi not joining. So then in the next chapter, Robin joins instead as the 7th member. And now I bring your attention to the cover page. Luffy paints a Jolly Roger on a bear, accidentally also paints a bird. Vivi gets Kuma's pawpaw fruit and is steamed around the bear deprived of her cubs, while Robin is named after a bird. Luffy's painting the Jolly Roger symbolizes recruiting a crew member to his pirate crew. He's recruiting Vivi, the bear, accidentally gets Robin, the bird. Chapter 8. So the story of how we meet Franky is the Mary is breaking down and ready to sink. The Straw Hats go to the city of the water fountain and meet the shipwright who is Frankenstein's monster. Stitched up and built with parts from a ship's corpse. This is why he dissociates completely from the name Cutty Phlegm and becomes Franky, Frankenstein, once he becomes a cyborg. In chapter 8, we see a ship sinking, then we get this weird shot of a water fountain, and we meet the Frankenstein from Buggy's crew, nails in the head and all. Chapter 9. We're told multiple times that this is a ghost town due to the actions of pirates. This is similar to how we meet Brook, in a ghost sea, in a ghost ship, where everyone else had been killed by the actions of pirates. We also get introduced to Buggy, his character design featuring prominently bones, with the crossed bones in his face and the skull and bones in his hat. Chapter 10. In the cover page we see Nami guiding a large pig that carries a treasure chest with a pirate flag. Chapter 13 is named Treasure, and I believe that this is because the 13 Straw Hats are a treasure. So back to the pig. The pig carries the treasure marked by a pirate flag. If the treasure is the crew, then the chest with the pirate flag is the ship. Nami guides it as the navigator, but the one doing the driving is the pig, the helmsman Jinbei. This also ties to the Zodiac. Now again, I won't explain fully all the signs, but just know for now that Jinbei would be the boar or pig. Not only because of his tusks, but also because Japanese boars are named Yama Kujira, meaning mountain whale. This is also the chapter when we get the first mention of Arlong, albeit indirect. I don't think I need to explain Jinbei's connection to Arlong. Chapter 11 is named Haiso. It has a very clever triple meaning. See, Haiso can mean take flight, as in literally, take flight as in fleeing, and also delivery. In this chapter, Buggy takes flight by using his previously unknown ability to fly his body parts to surprise Zoro with an attack from behind. Using an unexpected ability to fly to surprise Zoro with an attack from behind is exactly how Carrot is introduced. Carrot and Buggy both fly with their feet, Carrot by jumping midair and Buggy by having to maintain his feet on the ground. This is also what we see in the cover page, the cheetahs seemingly taking flight by running. Then next in the chapter, the Straw Hats take flight by fleeing from Buggy's crew. Carrot becomes a real potential crew member when the Straw Hats are fleeing from Big Mom's territory. That's when Pedro sacrifices himself, leaving his will of the Dawn to Carrot, and the crew of the Sunny becomes just the Straw Hats plus Carrot. This is when you get volume covers like this, for example. Finally, delivery. Buggy goes on to found Buggy's Delivery. Carrot's job in Zou was as a kingsbird, literally delivering messages between Inuarashi and Nekomamushi. The theme of delivery also ties into her association with Hermes. Chapter 12 is weirdly on the nose. The chapter's name is Inu, meaning dog, and is about Choucho the dog guarding his dead owner's store from pirates. Yamato, the dog, user of the Inu no Mi, acts as a protector of Wano, the memento from her dead idol Oden. Her devil fruit model, the Okuchi no Makami, is said to be a guardian deity of Wano country. Like Chow Chow never left the store for several months after his owner's death, Yamato never left Onigashima since Oden's death 20 years ago. Finally, chapter 13's name is Treasure. In this chapter, the treasure Chow Chow is protecting, the store, is burned to the ground. Chow Chow loses his treasure in tragedy, but is freed from his duty of guarding it, and thus can come to aid the Straw Hats later on. Likewise, Alabasta, the treasure that Vivi was protecting, the reason she couldn't join the Straw Hats before, has been devastated by the Marines and the Blackbeard pirates. Thus Vivi is freed from her duty of protecting it and can return to the Straw Hats.
So we know every Straw Hat needs a dream, some kind of great ambition that we expect to be fulfilled by the end of the series. There's a little bit of a pattern to those dreams that I don't see being discussed too much. For the first 5 recruits, that is, up to Chopper, all of their dreams seem completely independent and completely unrelated to Luffy becoming the Pirate King. But when we get to Robin, something changes. Robin's dream is entirely dependent on the Straw Hats reaching Laugh Tale. In a sense, her dream is a part of the crew reaching Laugh Tale and Luffy becoming the Pirate King. And the same can be said for the crew members following her. For Frankie, his dream is for the Sunny to go around the world, so obviously reaching Laugh Tale. And for Brook, he wants to complete his voyage around the world and see Laboon after going past Traverse Mountain. In a way, their dreams and Luffy's dream of becoming the Pirate King are one and the same. But then, when we get to Jinbei, something changes again. You see, Jinbei's dream is to bring harmony among the races, to end slavery, to end discrimination.
See, for Jinbei's dream, it is not enough for Luffy to become the Pirate King like Roger. This is now about what Roger couldn't do, what the Roger Pirates were too early for. It's about this great change that the world has been waiting for hundreds of years. And the same can be said for the Straw Hats following him. For Carrot, she should be inheriting Pedro's will of the dawn of the world. For Yamato, since she is inspired by Oden yet still needs to find her own path, it's easy to imagine that her dream could be a follow-up or an extension of Oden's dream. Oden wanted to open up Wano, but even if Wano is open, the world itself isn't. In a One Piece world, people, like Pedro for example, can get branded as pirates and criminalized simply for adventuring without the government's permission. Thus, Yamato's dream is likely going to be about opening the world itself and granting everyone the freedom to set sail and to come and go as they please without anyone's permission. And here's an interesting thing. When we talk about opening up Wano, there are 2 ways that Wano is closed. Firstly, it's closed politically, the closed borders policy. Secondly, we can talk about the geographical barrier, the way Wano is raised above the sea, creating this natural barrier that leads most ships to sink, making Wano a natural fortress. And the same can be said for the world itself. The world is closed politically because of the Marines, and the world is also closed geographically because of the Red Line and the calm belts dividing the world into 6 different oceans. Thus, Yamato's dream will likely entail both opening up the world politically, making sure people don't get criminalized by the government simply for setting sail without permission, and also opening the world geographically, the destruction of the Red Line and the destruction of the calm belts so that people around the world can sail freely. And for Vivi, what was her main trait again? That's right, being a pacifist. After seeing a Shichibukai creating a civil war in her country for his own gain, and finally seeing her country be devastated by a conflict between the Marines and the Blackbeard pirates for Pluton, Vivi's priority will surely be peace, that these endless wars between pirates and Marines for control of territory, where the innocent citizens are used merely as pawns, ends, that there is peace in the world and that the innocent civilians can live with safety, not living in fear of either pirates or the Marines.
The individual ambitions of the 4 recruits of the New World will make the basis for the new world that Luffy and the Straw Hats will be creating. The end of discrimination, the dawn of the world, the freedom to set sail, and peace for the innocent. But now we have to wonder, one of those things is a bit vague, isn't it? I mean, what the hell is even the dawn of the world? Well, I believe Carrot herself holds the answer to that, but more on that later on. Oh, and there's another interesting thing that connects these 4 individuals. Remember in Fishman Island how it was a big plot point that no one in the crew had Luffy's F blood type, except for Jinbei? Well, coincidence or not, all of the New World recruits have F blood type. And yes, that includes Karoo.
Doesn't make any sense for a bird to have a human blood type. No. Did that stop Oda? Also no. The cover page of chapter 861 features Nekomamushi and 13 cats around the Kotatsu. People have speculated for a long time that these cats represent the Straw Hats, and Zoro and Jinbei are really obvious, but have not come to an agreement about who's who. I'm gonna explain who each one represents. Firstly, Nekomamushi himself. He represents the Thousand Sunny. He looks like a lion, his color scheme is pretty much an exact match for the Sunny. More aptly I should say, Nekomamushi is the effigy or maybe the spirit of the Sunny. Him plus the Kotatsu makes the Sunny, the Kotatsu gathering the cats and bringing them warmth and comfort as the Sunny does to the crew. Number 1. Luffy. This cat is in the forefront as the protagonist and has Luffy's characteristic dumb stare. He looks at us, the reader, as if presenting his crew behind him. I've seen people argue that this is supposed to be Chopper because of the hiding behind a corner, that the whole gag is that he hides wrong. Also, the cat looks happy rather than shy or afraid. If you don't see this drunk cat wearing a haramaki is supposed to be Zoro, I swear to God, man. Reclining and relaxing under a parasol umbrella, like Nami regularly does. For this cat, the goggles could mean either Usopp or Franky, but this cat has a black coloring on his fur going from his waist all the way down to his feet, making him look like he's wearing pants. The one article of clothing Franky has never once worn. He's also sneakily looking down from a vantage point as if sniping. This cat is Sanji. The paw in his mouth is a reference to Sanji smoking with his hand holding the cigarette to his mouth. He also has exactly 3 stripes on his back. Sanji has that name because he's the son number 3. Like his brothers are Ichiji, Niji, Yonji, and Reiju is the firstborn. This cat is Chopper. The gray of his fur looks like it could be brown like Chopper's if the page was colored. This cat is also the only one to have a nose colored darker than its fur, Chopper's blue nose. Cats numbers 7 and 13 look at each other, implying some kind of connection between the two. Cat number 7 is Robin and cat number 13 is Vivi. Robin and Vivi were both in Baroque works. They started out as enemies, first to the crew and then to each other. Robin joins instead of Vivi, and now they are both wanted by the high echelons of the world government. The difference between the two cats is in the paws. 7 puts her paws towards her, under her chin. This could be a reference to Robin's characteristic pose with her hands under her chin, but more importantly, I believe it is a reference to her fighting pose, where she brings her arms crossed towards her, under her head. Meanwhile, Vivi's cat puts her paws straight ahead in full display, like Kuma, as that would be her fighting style once she inherits the Niku Niku no Mi. This cat is Franky. He's spotted all over as perhaps a reference to Franky having added many outside parts to his body as a cyborg, and more importantly, he happily hugs the wood of the Kotatsu that represents the Thousand Sunny. The cat hugs it because the Sunny is Franky's most beloved creation. This is literally Skeleton Cat wearing a tuxedo and sunglasses. I rest my case. This is Jinbei, wears a cape and coat exactly like Jinbei, sits like a boss and drinks out of a sake cup. We know the importance of the sake cup to Jinbei. This here is Yamato. Striped back is a reference to the striped Odin robe thing she wears and that is central to her character design. The cat also climbs the table recklessly with a wide smile as if adventuring, classic Odin behavior, always being the first to disembark on an island, a behavior Yamato is sure to share as she spent 20 years locked in Onigashima waiting to see the world, like Odin felt locked in Wano before joining Whitebeard. Finally, this cat here is Carrot. But to properly understand what's going on here, first we need to address that one devil fruit with the numbering 100 that you probably forgot about by now. I tried different combinations of spellings for 10 and 0, and the possible words are Jurei, meaning the age of a tree, and that doesn't sound very promising for a devil fruit. There's also Torei, meaning tray, which is also pretty bad. Tore, meaning training, which is and Toa, meaning eternity, permanence, perpetuity, or immortality.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Now remember the 2 other things that we know about Carrot's future? She needs some kind of personal connection to the dawn of the world through which she inherits Pedro's will, and she needs a way to be able to turn Sulong without the full moon. And now, let's go back to the cat. Carrot and Brooks' cat look at each other, implying some kind of connection between the two. This is because after Carrot eats the Toa Toa no Mi, they will be the 2 immortal or unaging members of the crew, the ones who will outlive all the rest. This cat wears a wristwatch. This is because the Toa Toa no Mi will be the opposite or the counterpart to the Toki Toki no Mi and will give Carrot time-stopping abilities.
She is likely then to wear a watch to keep track of the difference between the time experienced by her and the time experienced by everyone else. Finally, you can see there's a duality between light and dark happening with this cat. One ear black, the other white. One eye black, the other white. One eye closed, the other open. This is because Carrot represents the twilight, in Japanese, Toa Eraito, the one who connects day and night, and thus the one who marks the coming of the dawn. This is the title she will gain by inheriting the Toa no Mi and thus gaining the ability to turn Sulong at any time. In this way, through the Toa no Mi, is how Carrot will inherit Pedro's will of the dawn of the world. Am I rushing through this? Well, of course I am.
Because believe it or not, this one plot point of Carrot inheriting the Toa no Mi is the key to understand not only all of the setup we have gotten for Carrot thus far, but also Zunisha's crime, what is Momonosuke's role in bringing the dawn of the world, what the dawn of the world itself is, and even what are Imu's intentions and why Imu created the world government in the first place. Sounds crazy to you? Well, maybe tune in next time and make your own conclusions, because that should be the very next video I post. For this one, that's all. Ciao!